Hey guys, welcome back. Uh, this is Bobcat Corner, and after some time, here's a new episode. This is episode number 13 of Bobcat Corner. Um I'm the host, Steven Vitte, and I want to discuss in this episode college football rankings and things like that, but in particular, discussing the G5 conferences. And as you will read the title of this episode, it has everything to do with the college football playoff. And I've already discussed it in previous videos about how the G5 conferences should have more representation in the college football playoff, but that's for different subject, different time. But here, it's going to be a quick rundown of the top five uh, potential contenders for that one guaranteed spot in the college football playoff for the 2024 season. And I'm going to go the the method I'm going to use here for going through the top five would be to pick one team out of each G5 conference to represent this list as far as the likelihood of them probably getting a shot at the college football playoff, even as the number 12 seed, which in all likelihood, that's where they would be. That's where they would end up. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's not waste any time here. So, when I say top five, I don't mean in particular order like one, two, three, four, five, or anything like that. I'm just giving you a basic group of five teams that I believe, just opinion, but what I believe are best suited to get that one spot in the college football playoff. So we're going to go conference by conference here in the G5 to see uh, which teams uh, fit the bill, so to speak. So let's start off with the Mountain West Conference. And that would be a good team that I have been following for a long time, even though I have no ties to this university at all. But I vividly remember that one special bowl game that they played against Oklahoma. You guys know what I'm talking about already. The Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, 2007, I believe, and that team would be the Boise State Broncos. The 2024 edition of the Boise State Broncos, I'm going to talk about. I believe in that conference, the Mountain West Conference, the Boise State Broncos have the best shot of landing in the college football playoff as the G5 representative coming out of the Mountain West. If it's going to be a Mountain West team, I believe it's going to be the Boise State Broncos. And I'm just going to review here their stats, what they did last year, so you guys can comprehend, what you're getting in the Boise State Broncos. So last year, the Boise State Broncos, they went 10-4. They made it to the Mountain West Conference Championship game. Had a great season overall. 10-4. You would like for that to be like a couple more wins, but overall a successful season. And what they're getting in 2024, it's definitely something to take note of because, for starters, yes, they're getting a quarterback Malachi Nelson, who transfers from USC, Southern California, and there have been a lot of glowing reviews about his play, about his style of play, and so having that translate to Boise State, it's going to be fascinating to see for starters. And also, as far as talent goes, the Boise State Broncos, they're getting back a total stud, you know, a great player in Ashton Genty. He's coming back to the team this upcoming season. And last year, Ashton Genty, he just went off, against opponents. He had 203 rushes for uh, 1,262 yards, and he scored 14 touchdowns. And even as a receiving threat, he did very well too. He had 39 receptions for 552 yards and caught five passes for touchdowns. So great production there with Ashton Genty. And it would not surprise me if he was contending for the Heisman Trophy again this year. Um, But as a team, Boise State, the Broncos, they went 10-4, like I said, and yeah, as far as last year goes, passing yards, they were 117th. That's not so good, but I would not worry about that because that was last year. 221.3 passing yards per game. That's the average. And as far as rushing yards go, they were 16th in the nation. Believe it or not, they were 16th in the entire nation in rushing yards per game at 214.7 rushing yards. And also total yards per game, if you add that all up, they were 34th in the nation with 436 yards per game, total yards. So the potential is there for Boise State, and if you consider what they've been able to recruit to their team this past off season, there's definitely a lot of promise. Like I just said, Malachi Nelson being one of them. But also, I want to direct your attention to their defense. Um, I'm just going to name one player. Uh, that guy's name would be Ahmed Hassanein. I'm hoping I'm saying that last name correctly. Hassanein. Ahmed Hassanein. He's a defensive tackle for the Broncos. 6'3", 270 pounds, and you know, I mean, he did amazing work. From what the film I've seen of him on the Boise State defense, you know, obviously the Boise State defense, they're in good hands when you have players like that. So the defense for Boise State last year, 11 interceptions and 11 forced fumbles. That's pretty good. And now when you look at the schedule, when it comes to Boise State, they have a somewhat difficult schedule, but it's definitely manageable, in my opinion. So they have a huge game right off the bat on September 7th. They have to go to Oregon to face the Oregon Ducks, a team I believe that is easily a top 10 caliber team in the entire nation. So Boise State has to get up for that game against Oregon. They have to show up against Oregon. They have to give it everything they got against the Oregon Ducks because everyone knows the Oregon Ducks, they're not going to be sleeping at the wheel. So, yeah, that's a game to look out for. And also, in conference, the Mountain West Conference, keep an eye on Boise State at Wyoming on November 23rd. That is going to be a pivotal game, especially if Wyoming gets on a good run. You know, and when you have these two teams on a collision course, that could be for a very interesting matchup. Boise State at Wyoming, November 23rd. And lastly, towards the end of the season, I find it intriguing for a variety of reasons. Boise State at home on the blue turf, but they're going to be facing Oregon State. Now, obviously, Oregon State, they've been depleted, you know, for their talent on their roster. But if Oregon State has a better than expected season this year, don't be surprised if that's like a trap game for Boise State because Oregon State may not have a lot to play for at that point, but I can easily see Oregon State getting up for a game like this. That's on November 30th. So keep an eye on that. Boise State versus Oregon State. I'm very intrigued by that. And yeah, so out of the Mountain West, I would say Boise State. If you're going to pick one out of the Mountain West Conference for a G5 representative for the college football playoff. Moving on, we're going to go to the conference that I follow because I'm an Ohio Bobcats fan. I have the flag right behind me flying. Um, Representing the MAC, though, I believe if you're going to pick one to possibly represent the G5 in the college football playoff this year, I would have to go with the Toledo Rockets. Now, I firmly believe, along with the Miami of Ohio Redhawks, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, Toledo and Miami, Ohio, they're the two teams that really beat in the MAC, in my opinion, this year. And specifically Toledo, if I had to pick one. Toledo went 11-3 last year. They made it to the MAC conference championship last year. Great season. Jason Candle, he knows what he's doing as head coach for Toledo. Uh, Great coach, in my opinion. And they're getting back good talent, such as, for example, wide receiver Junior Vandeross III. He had 47 receptions for 664 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. And yes, they they are going to have to adjust to a new quarterback this year, QB1 in Tucker Gleason. So we'll see what goes on there in the quarterback room. But I do believe Toledo is positioned for a good run this year. They were 120th in passing yards per game. Again, not so great, 220.4 yards passing yards per game, but they're 28th in rushing yards, per game in the entire nation at 198.4, and combined total yards per game 57th in the country at 418.9 total yards. So pretty good production there. And for their defense, Toledo, it probably goes, not as talked about compared to the offense. But Toledo's defense is fairly good, in my opinion. They had 11 interceptions on defense, and they had 14 forced fumbles, which is pretty good. So they have the ability to strip the football away from the opposing offensive players. So that is a good sign. And when I look at their schedule, the Toledo Rockets, they have the most important games on Toledo's schedule would be on September 14th at Mississippi State. It is an SEC team, not historically the most successful SEC team, but nonetheless an SEC team. Mississippi State, always got to get up for those games. So that's going to be interesting what Toledo's going to do when they go down to Mississippi State and play the Bulldogs down there. That's on September 14th. And like I just said a minute ago, Miami of Ohio, that's like Toledo, Miami, Ohio are just like 1 and 1A when it comes to the quality of MAC teams. So that is basically a de facto pseudo or whatever you want to call it, temporary in-season MAC championship game right there already on October 5th between Toledo and Miami of Ohio. Keep an eye on that game because that could really determine the MAC champion right there. And also, lastly, because hey guys, this is Bobcat Corner, okay? I gotta support the Ohio Bobcats any way I can. So I'm just gonna say it. The last important game for Toledo on their schedule would be between the Toledo Rockets and the Ohio Bobcats on November 20th. So depending on how well the Ohio Bobcats do this year, and I have to believe that the Ohio Bobcats are right there, like that tier just right below Toledo, Miami, Ohio. If the Ohio Bobcats get on a good run here, we can easily be talking about the Ohio Bobcats instead. If Toledo or Miami of Ohio slip up, we could be talking about Ohio instead. So November 20th, home game for Toledo, but they're hosting the Ohio Bobcats. Keep an eye on that game if both of those teams are doing very well at that point. Overall, Toledo's schedule is fairly easy, all things considered. Like I said, toughest game is probably just for the fact that it's SEC team, Mississippi State, but we'll see how that goes. But anyway, Toledo representing the MAC. And going through this list now, Conference USA, I think it's obvious, guys. The Liberty Flames. That's the team I would pick to represent the Conference USA, the G5, for the college football playoff. And that's really the consensus number one for many people, many college football fans right now. And you can't blame them because Liberty, they went 13-1, went completely undefeated throughout the regular season. Of course, they had that, terrible loss against the Oregon Ducks in the Fiesta Bowl, but, hardly anybody was going to beat the Oregon Ducks last year. So Liberty Flames, they're no joke in my opinion. I believe they're here to stay. And Liberty's defense, it's not said enough about Liberty's defense last year. Of course, you think the stats are skewed because of the quality of opponents they played, but I'm just going to say it. Liberty's defense, they're no joke either. Last year, they had 21 interceptions on defense, 7 forced fumbles, and they have a quality defense. Keep an eye on Liberty's defense, in my opinion. But of course, when you go back to the offense, you have Caden Salter coming back, and he did very well. Completed 177 of 290 passes for 2,876 yards for 32 touchdowns. Only threw 6 interceptions, and 155th in the pass with 205.9, second in the entire country last year in rushing yards per game, 293.3, and then total yards per game, fifth in the entire nation with 499.1 total yards per game. There's got to be some truth behind those stats, guys, when it comes to Liberty. And when you look at their schedule, they have a you know, fairly easy schedule, but in my opinion, I think it'd be more of like a middle of the pack kind of schedule, kind of so-so, somewhat easy, somewhat difficult maybe. Uh, they're at New Mexico State on September 7th. Keep an eye on that game. They're at Appalachian State, Boone, North Carolina, I believe, September 28th. And they're at home, Liberty, they're at home hosting Western Kentucky November 23rd. Those are the three games on Liberty's schedule that I personally would keep an eye on if I were you guys. So yeah, keep those games in mind. Now moving over here, representing the American Athletic Conference, if I had to pick one out of that conference to represent the G5 in this year's college football playoff, I would have to go with UTSA, the University of Texas San Antonio Roadrunners. Now, they went 9-4 last year. They had a fairly good season, all things considered, and they do have quite a bit of talent coming back to their roster next year. Uh, they have like just great talent. Quarterback Frank Harris, and they're just loaded on offense. They've been loaded the last few years on offense. The Roadrunners have been UTSA. Um, they were 71st in the country in passing yards with 249.8. That's a little bit better than the last few teams I've just mentioned. And 81st in the nation in rushing yards per game with 171.8. And total yards per game, they were 53rd in the nation with 421.6 total yards per game. So definitely middle of the pack kind of stats there for UTSA. But when I look at their talent, it's very promising, and you have reason for optimism there. And their defense, once again, defense. This is the thing about defense in football. Defense wins championships, and I truly believe that. Does UTSA have the defense to compete? I believe the answer is yes. And last year, UTSA's defense, the Roadrunners, they had 10 interceptions and they had 12 forced fumbles. I look at their defensive stats, UTSA. I dissected that in particular when I was going through San Antonio, and I was like, man, this is why are people talking about the defense here when it comes to a team like UTSA? Highlighted player here I have for the Roadrunners would be linebacker Jamori Robinson. He's just one example. I'm just going to read his stats for you. He played all 13 games for UTSA last year, 4.5 sacks, one forced fumble, 40 tackles. It's just general productivity like that you need out of someone like a linebacker. Uh, that's just one example. Jamori Robinson, just one example of what UTSA has on their defense. And just like Liberty, UTSA is no joke on defense, in my opinion. And when you look at their schedule, though, out of all the teams I'm listing here, guys, I believe University of Texas San Antonio, the Roadrunners, they have by far the toughest schedule out of these 5 teams I'm going to talk about here in this episode. Just go through UTSA's schedule. They have a really tough gauntlet of sorts of a schedule. And I'm just going to name 3 games on their schedule right now. They're at Texas State, who I'm going to talk about in a minute, on September 7th. They're at Texas the following week, the Texas Longhorns, the following week at Austin, September 14th. And then push a little bit back to November 2nd. The third important game for UTSA would be at home in San Antonio. They're hosting Memphis. Those are the 3 most important games on UTSA's schedule that I would look at if we're going to look at this team, carefully for CFP consideration. And speaking of Texas State, I mentioned that game between Texas State and UTSA for a reason because let's go for it. This is Bobcat Corner still, but I'm going to talk about the Texas State Bobcats now. The game between UTSA and Texas State, that is a critical game in determining who's going to represent the G5 conferences in the college football playoff, in my opinion. And I've chosen Texas State to represent the Sun Belt. Should it come from the Sun Belt to represent the G5 in the CFP? Texas State Bobcats, they were 8-5 last year. They got off to a great start last year before, tailing off a little bit. But overall, you see the potential there in the Texas State Bobcats. They were 55th in the nation last year in passing yards per game average, 263.3 yards, 48th in the nation in rushing yards per game, 187.6 yards rushing yards, and they were 22nd overall in total yards per game. So there's a lot to like. There's just a lot to like from Texas State uh, University here. And their defense, they had 6 interceptions on defense, and they forced 19 fumbles. 19 forced fumbles on defense. They can get to the quarterback or ball carrier and they can knock that ball loose. That's important if you're going to have a great defense in football. So, yeah, once again, no joke on defense. You got to have a solid enough defense to compete. Whether you're G5 or you're Power 5, you've got to compete on defense. So, look at Texas State in the Sun Belt. I'm going to go with Texas State in the Sun Belt. Featured player here is running back Ismail Mahdi, and I'm hoping I'm saying that name right. Ismail Mahdi, running back for Texas State. He had 199 rushes for 1,209 yards and 10 touchdowns. And also on Texas State, on their defense, I'm going to highlight defensive end Ben Bell. I watched some of his film on defense. Very impressive player, in my opinion. 57 tackles, 10 sacks, great productivity. What can you say? When you have players like that on both offense and defense, you're going to be in games. Texas State has the quality and the talent to compete with anybody if they just put a complete game together all year. Uh, in their schedule this year, Texas State, 3 games I look at would be, like I said, against UTSA, uh, September 7th. That's a critical game right there. They're at home, Texas State, for that game. Also, although it's kind of hard for me to pick another important game for Texas State because I believe they have the easiest schedule out of the 5 I'm talking about here, I'm just going to pick this one for Texas State. Do not sleep on Old Dominion. Texas State at Old Dominion University on October 19th. I'm just going to go ahead with that game. That could be a trap game for Texas State. They may or may not get up for that game against Old Dominion. They have to travel to Old Dominion to play that game on October 19th. So anything can happen in a game like that. So Texas State, be wide awake when you go to Old Dominion on October 19th if you're going to go on a big run here. And lastly, the last important game for Texas State would be at home versus Georgia State. Georgia State Panthers. That's on November 23rd. Yeah, Georgia State, another up and coming G5 team, great market. Atlanta, Georgia area market. So Georgia State, in time they could become quite a powerhouse in the G5 if they play their cards right. So yeah, that's the most important stuff you look at when it comes to Texas State's schedule. But yeah, those are my five teams from the G5 conferences that I would personally look at to represent the college football playoff, G5 representative. In summary, the 5 teams that I think have the best shot of representing the G5 conferences in the college football playoff in 2024 would be Mountain West Conference, Boise State; MAC, Toledo; Conference USA, Liberty; American Athletic Conference, UTSA Roadrunners. And then lastly, the Sun Belt Conference, Texas State Bobcats. Those are the five I'm going to go with, and I could be easily wrong about that. We'll see how this season goes, and that's it. That's just a basic rundown. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these games play out. The G5. I know a lot of college football fans like to make jokes about the G5, but this is no joke. You know, we're all here to have fun, and we're all here to see how our favorite teams, perform on the field. And such as these teams that I just mentioned in this episode, you got quality. You got real quality. Okay, sure, you have issues when you're playing SEC or Big Ten teams. I get that. But, you have quality teams, such as what I just read off to you guys. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Did I pick the right teams? Did I pick the wrong teams? Uh, any feedback on what I just mentioned in these five teams? So I'd like to hear what you guys think. Hope you guys are having a good day today. Yeah, just it feels good to be doing this again. Been busy doing a lot of stuff, behind the scenes. But yeah, this is Bobcat Corner, guys, and I promise that there will be more content on the way here soon, and especially during the regular season when the Ohio Bobcats start playing. You're definitely going to get more content there. So take care, guys, and until we see you again, thank you.